Welcome to our teacher training. This is our very first session together, in which we're going to be discussing some fundamental and academic issues concerning theories of learning. As you watch the video, please write down a few questions for later discussion. We start by talking about motivation, and there are a number of different explanations to what motivation should be. There are behaviorist explanations, cognitive definitions. So first off, a definition of what motivation is. Motivation is the extent to which you make choices about goals and the effort you will devote to that pursuit. So, according to behaviorist views, we can say that motivation is dependent on the role of rewards and punishments. And it's also got to do with reinforcement of behavior to cause motivation to persist. Now, according to cognitive views, we've got three very important approaches. First one is called the drive theory. So, what drives people to learn something new? It's got to do with their ability to explore new thoughts, new ideas, and be able to handle these new ideas. It's called manipulation. Activity that is involved in handling new learning, stimulation, and knowledge, and ego enhancement. Perhaps one of the most important approaches was devised by a guy called Abraham Maslow. The theory is called hierarchy of needs. And as you observe the pyramid here, you see that the most basic needs a human being has, which is at the bottom. Observe the pyramid and go up a minute for reflection here. Take down notes. Okay, now the third cognitive theory which explains motivation is called self-control. Observe the grid. Its proposals have to do with the fact that people have to have control of their needs. They should be able to control their confidence, their emotions, their social awareness. They have to be able to manage themselves so as to achieve their ultimate goal, and people should be able to influence others when it comes to their decisions. Take notes, please. Very well. Now, what are theories of learning? They are conceptual frameworks that describe how information is absorbed, processed, and retained during learning. Cognitive, emotional, and environmental influences, as well as prior experience, all play a part in how understanding or a worldview is acquired or changed, and knowledge and skills retained. Therefore, we'll talk about the main theories of learning that affect ELT. First and foremost, we should talk about behaviorism. It's B.F. Skinner. So what's behaviorism? It's the idea that behavior can be conditioned through the use of stimulus-response reinforcement procedures, so that people will learn good habits through constant reinforcement. Cognitivism and constructivism, devised mainly among many important educators, Piaget. So what's constructivism? It is a learning theory found in psychology which explains how people might acquire knowledge and learn. It therefore has direct application to education. The theory suggests that humans construct knowledge and meaning from their experiences. Piaget's theory of constructivism learning has had wide-ranging impact on learning theories and teaching methods. Research support for constructivist teaching techniques have been mixed, with some research supporting these techniques and other research contradicting those results. But inevitably, it has fundamental importance in learning a foreign language. So according to constructivists and cognitivists, learning is a way to store information, and humans work like computers. The natural approach was developed by Stephen Krashen in the 80s. Well, he talks about a number of principles to the natural approach. The first principle, which is called the acquisition learning hypothesis, is defined in here. Language acquisition, an unconscious process developed through using language meaningfully, is different from language learning, which is consciously learning or discovering rules about a language. And language acquisition is the only way competence in a second language occurs. Therefore, acquisition is different from learning. The monitor hypothesis. Conscious learning operates only as a monitor or editor that checks or repairs the output of what has been acquired. The natural order hypothesis. Grammatical structures are acquired in a predictable order, and it does little good to try to learn them in another order. The input hypothesis. People acquire language best from messages that are just slightly beyond their current competence. And finally, the affective filter hypothesis. The learner's emotional state can act as a filter that impedes or blocks inputs necessary to acquisition. Now, the strongest belief nowadays is that people learn from each other, which is called social interactionism, devised by a guy called Lev Vygotsky. Social interactionism is an approach to language acquisition that stresses the environment and the context in which the language is being learned. It focuses on the pragmatics of language rather than grammar which should come later. We'll talk about the idea of pragmatics a little later, okay? Don't worry. So in this approach, the beginning speaker and the experienced speaker, be they child or an adult or second language learner or fluent speaker, they all exist in a negotiated arrangement where feedback is always possible. In other words, there always can be interaction. And it was Vygotsky who developed the idea of ZPD, Zone of Proximal Development. It's been defined as the distance between the actual developmental level as determined by independent problem solving and the level of potential development as determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers. This is a highly theoretical definition, so take a minute and think a bit about what zone of proximal development is and how you can explore this in our lessons. Well, Vygotsky views interaction with peers as an effective way of developing skills and strategies. He suggests that teachers use cooperative learning exercises where less competent children or learners develop with the help from more skillful peers within the zone of proximal development. Vygotsky believes that when a student is at the ZPD for a particular task, providing the appropriate assistance will give the student enough of a boost to achieve the task. The ZPD is a challenge, the right amount of challenge. It has become synonymous in the literature with the term scaffolding. Once the student with the benefit of scaffolding masters the task, the scaffolding can then be removed, and the student will then be able to complete the task again on his or her own. With this in mind, we finally get to the cycle. The experiential learning cycle devised by an educator called David A. Kolb. The theory presents a cyclical model of learning that focuses on choice of experience, consisting of 4 stages that may begin at any rate, at stage, but must follow each other in a certain sequence. Concrete experience. Do. When the learner is actively experiencing an activity. Reflective observation. That is, to reflect back on that experience, to think, to observe, a reflection on what had happened. Then abstract conceptualization is when the learner attempts to conceptualize a model or theory of what was observed, make sense of what he or she had observed. And finally, let's experiment again. It's the active experimentation, when the learner plans how to use a model or plan for a forthcoming experience. Last but not least, here's our checklist. So this is what you have to think about. During the concrete experience phase, What's the context? Are you able to provide your learner with relevance, with interaction, even if it's only with you? What for? What's the purpose of this experience? Can you diagnose language and social activities that can diagnose how much a student can produce in terms of language? And reflective observation. Who brought the text? You? The student? When observing, are you using reading or listening? What's the text? For abstract conceptualization, when you're working with the language, the think phase, are you teaching grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, spelling? How do you reconstruct the language then? Through speaking or writing? Thanks for watching. Now we'll be able to discuss your questions.